The second studio album from Danish heavy metal band Mercyful Fate is a continuation of their occult-drenched lyrics and dark atmosphere, qualities that were not only highly influential on bands to come, but also put them into the crosshairs of censorship groups such as the PMRC. They even made it to that organization's Filthy 15 list. And while some rightfully praised their debut full-length, let's talk about my favorite Mercyful Fate album, Don't Break the Oath. So I discovered the band in January of 1985, having blind bought both this album and the one before it, Melissa. I was 16 and already a big fan of Venom, having all of their LPs and enjoying their imagery and lyrics as well. Though it was also clear that exploring all things satanic was far more for show with Venom, whereas Mercyful Fate weren't exactly kidding around. Even King Diamond himself was public with that same opinion about Venom back in the press of the 1980s. Add to that the fact that King was and still is an avowed Satanist and a member of the Church of Satan, even so much as weaving philosophy and actual text from the Satanic Bible into a couple of these songs. Of course, we'll get more into that as we go through the tracks. As for the studio album we're discussing, it was recorded at Easy Sound Recording in Copenhagen, Denmark during May of 1984. Producer was Henrik Lund, who also produced Melissa for the band, as well as Hank Sherman's follow-up band and album Fate in 1985. Original release date for Don't Break the Oath was September 7th, 1984. The chief difference in the mix between this album and Melissa was that the band not only had a little more time to produce it, but they, and especially King, had a lot more to say on the final mix, which might be noticeable on this record, for the better, I would say. As for the tour of this album, it was the first time Mercyful Fate played in the United States. The tour started in Portland, Oregon on October 20th, 1984, and ended in Providence, Rhode Island on December 16th of the same year, continuing on to Europe until the end of 1984. For some of the US tour, they played with Motorhead and Exciter, and with Voivod in Canada. Generally, 4 tracks from Don't Break the Oath were usually performed in a full set: Come to the Sabbath, Welcome Princes of Hell, Gypsy, and The Oath. Interesting choices because I would have expected at least a Desecration of Souls and maybe even a Dangerous Meeting in there, but still, they made some solid choices. And if you're wondering about vinyl pressings of Don't Break the Oath, there have been over 40, including picture discs and test pressings. That same year in Canada, it was released by Attic, in America by Combat, and there was also a Music for Nations pressing in the UK. Currently, Metal Blade holds the rights to the work and is responsible for the reissues of the album since 2014. Speaking of Metal Blade, they will have, or already had released, depending on when you see this, a 40th anniversary pressing of the album on red vinyl on October 25th, 2024. I also have the original CD right here, which I bought sometime in the late 1980s. And we should mention the cover art here, which was done by Thomas Holm, who also did the cover for Melissa, as well as most of the King Diamond solo band covers, not to mention the 2 releases for Denner Sherman back in the 2010s. Anyways, that's it for details. Let's get to the track by track. Starting with side 1, track 1, we've got A Dangerous Meeting. Track opens with a crunchy, pulsating riff, joined quickly by drum and bass, then a quick solo before vocals come in. King moves between his deeper, more operatic voice and his signature falsetto through the verse lines, with some additional soloing separating the verses. The chorus vocals ramp up the eeriness with layered harmonies. Really love when King punctuates the end of the chorus with his gravelly voice line, "They're gonna get themselves killed," followed by a falsetto repeat of the line. Comes out of nowhere, but so effective. Also lots more soloing here, largely by Denner, with some rhythm guitar tones seriously steeped in Judas Priest influence. Not a riff-heavy track, but plenty of soloing, and perhaps one of the more basic compositions compared to the others. At nearly the end, we get an almost dirgy riff with slow cymbal and snare taps, deep bells, and haunting layered solo work, but then back to the main riff for the last 2 lines. Might have been more interesting to end with a fade out of the slow part with the bells, but the clearly priest-like ending works too. A Dangerous Meeting was once called Walking Back to Hell when the band was more or less the Brats, and then later the track was called Death Kiss. Some of the riffs were different in the Bratz version, but enough is there to hear the connections. So the lyrics involve 7 people either gathered for a seance or, as King intended, a Ouija board session. Either way, spirits are involved, and the results of speaking with the dead are that the participants themselves end up dead. It's something of an intended cautionary tale from King about playing with, as he states, the powers of hell. Opening lyrics of the song pretty much set the tone. Tonight the circle is meeting again. Who will be the first to fall in trance? In here nobody is sensing the rain. Tonight the spirit will glance. So overall, a very strong opening track. Moving on to track 2, we have Nightmare. Track opens with an almost groove bass and drum passage, moving quickly into a chord-heavy riff to complement, then shifts to a solid driving riff underneath King's high falsetto delivery, where he spends a great deal of the song, popping in some mid-range on occasion for effect. The drumming on this one is particularly noteworthy. It's a bit jazzy and all over the place, but matching the off-kilter guitar rhythms. Denner brings the first solo at this point with a bit of soaring shred. This leads to a slow crunching riff while King accesses both his falsetto and his deeper and more ghostly vocals intertwining. A very cool riff shift follows that brings in some neoclassical tones, but then quickly into somewhat rapid, heavy riffing for King to finish off the final lines of the track. Really love the parts in between these lines when he screams a high note melody but then repeats itself. King is often really good at throwing in these brief, non-lyric melody lines which give off a creepy lullaby type of vibe. Anyways, track ends with King repeating the line, "You are insane," leading to another great demonic-sounding one-liner from him, "You're only living on borrowed time from your fate." And yes, I know the lyric sheet says "from your life," but I simply don't hear that. And there are known typos in the lyric sheet, more of which we'll get to later. Anyways, Sherman takes us out with an extended solo. The lyrics of the song were literally pulled from an actual nightmare that King had, hence the song title. Favorite line in this one is, "I hear her callin' for her coven to come. There's a light in the doorway, entering shadows whose number is 13. They do the sign of devil's seed." So far more variety in this track than the first one, and we're definitely starting to hear King explore his vocal style a bit as well. Moving on to track 3, we've got Desecration of Souls. Track opens with one of the most memorable opening riffs in this band's catalog. It's very slow, menacing, and downright gothic, almost emulative of a haunting organ dirge. Then it quickly is joined by a seriously dire warning from King, accessing a deep, scratchy growl that sounds like it's coming from a corpse newly risen from the grave. The first 30 seconds of this track alone must have scared concerned parents to no end. Anyways, heavy riffing follows with a mid-paced groove, while King alternates between a host of voices, all of which sounding distant and ethereal. Main riff on this is incredibly headbangable, with solos largely handled by Denner, with Sherman joining in before the final verse. Speaking of which, the track is very solo-heavy. Lots of guitar meandering and wailing, with some scant moments of shred. Track ends with a bit of a cacophonous flourish, much as you might hear in a live setting. Then it all just fades out. So, like A Dangerous Meeting, the lyrics are another cautionary tale, this time in 3 parts. The first involves necromancy, the second sex in a graveyard, and the third a widow lamenting the loss of her husband. Not sure why the widow is tossed in there, because I'm not sure that she's desecrating anything, but okay. I mean, King has said in his interviews that his English at the time was not too great, and some of that is reflected in the early lyrics, so maybe there's a lost nuance there. Either way, and hands down, the best lines in the song are the ones that open it, of course. "Stay away, white magician, young lovers and mourning wife. You're not welcome on our land, so I speak for the dead." So a solid creepy track interspersed with King's multiple voices and some cool soloing. Also, one of my favorite songs in this album as well. Moving on to track 4, we have Night of the Unborn. Track opens with a screaming guitar solo, joined quickly by the main riff, a quick proggy passage, and then straight to another solo, both by Sherman. And then King comes in with his more lullaby-type falsetto. Some cool bass runs underneath all of this for those paying attention. Lots of time shifts in this one as well, and likely the track that is the most all over the place. And while it holds its own, it's not an entirely strong track, but it does have a solid chorus and some great lead interplay between Denner and Sherman at the end. And I do love when King shouts, "This one's for the unborn." Classic King. Anyways, after the final solos, the track abruptly ends. So the lyrics are, to the best of my surmising, about ghost fetuses. I mean, it's the unborn, haunting, dancing, teasing a priest, the usual. And of course, we get some more of the cautionary stuff right here in the opening lyrics, which are absolutely my favorite in the song. They are, I forbid you entrance here. You step on hallowed ground. Don't you see this chapel? Shut up. Hold your tongue. They must rest in silence. It's the rebirth of the unborn. The rebirth of the unborn. It almost doesn't make sense. But anyways, a decent track with some great moments, but probably not one of the stronger tracks here. But since it's an amazing album, being one of the less impressive tracks is still worth some praise. Flipping over to side 2 and track 5, we've got The Oath. This was actually the song King wanted the record to open with, but the rest of the band outvoted him and wanted a dangerous meeting instead, according to Sherman. But you could definitely hear why. I mean, the track opens with a super creepy organ intro, played by King Diamond. In fact, all keyboards are by King. The organ bit moves on to the sound of wind, bells, and rain, clearly tributing Black Sabbath. The song, of course. Then we get a harpsichord passage over top with a distant-sounding King reciting a devotional text to Satan himself, followed by what I'll assume is the devil laughing, which brings us to the opening riff, an almost galloping speed run. Interestingly enough, the actual singing in this track doesn't begin until the 2-minute 12-second mark. The song does have an epic feel to it, and again, I can hear why this would have made an excellent opening track. But perhaps putting it on the B-side was a means to avoid the otherwise inevitable comparisons to Sabbath by distancing a little bit from it being the opener. Maybe. I mean, I'm not in their heads on that one. We also get more lullaby vocal passages by King, stylistically similar to the one I mentioned in Nightmare. They really are part of King's own style at this point. Definitely love it. And the 2 lead sections with Denner and Sherman trading off are also noteworthy, showing just how strong this guitar team really is. As strong as Downing and Tipton and Judas Priest even. And I don't say that lightly. Also, bass lines from Hanson are pretty great here. Definitely keep an ear out for those. Anyways, this was also one of 2 album tracks completely written by King Diamond, with the other one being Come to the Sabbath. More on that later, of course. Lyrically, we're getting a mix of lines from King Diamond himself, Aleister Crowley, and of course the Satanic Bible's invocation to Satan, with the part, in the name of Satan, the ruler of earth, open wide the gates of hell and come forth from the abyss, as well as the calling of the 4 crowned princes of hell, and who actually get their own song in about 2 more tracks. We also get the word pussant in there, and that's just a really fun word to say. Pussant, right? Anyways, plenty of time and mood shifts here, along with an epic feel, and in fact an epic length at over 7.5 minutes, the longest song on the record. Easily one of my favorite songs on this album, showcasing not only King's vocal and lyrical prowess, but his overall songwriting as well. Moving on to track 6, we have Gypsy. Track opens with a slow gallop riff and King's various voices coming in, occasionally bringing in some riff stop-starts. Solo about mid-track is shared once more between Denner and Sherman, and while great, the riff change-ups in this one shouldn't be ignored at all. They're pretty awesome. It's definitely a short song, almost the very shortest, second only to the instrumental later on. King throws in his lullaby passages here and there, and overall it's a good track, but like Night of the Unborn, it's not exactly the strongest. So the lyrics are about King's meeting with a gypsy lady. There's a crystal ball involved, and there seems to be a meaningful connection between King and the gypsy, but it's not exactly clear. At the end, we discover that the gypsy is inside of him, whatever that means. I do love the part where King sings, "Oh, no, 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 oh, my brain," or "I am you" in the second verse. You like my King imitation? I don't either. Anyways, this track always seems to fly by when I listen to it because, in part, it's short, but maybe also because there's so many other far stronger tracks here. Either way, I do dig it, but largely for King's vocal performance and some of the solo moments. Moving on to track 7, we have Welcome, Princes of Hell. Track opens with almost a boogie riff and a cool walking bass line underneath, but switches to a bit of a swagger as King brings in a lot of layered vocals for the verse. Another Denner-Sherman solo segment a little past the mid-mark, mostly twin lead work, but some trade-offs later. Great stuff. Especially love King's voice, or voices here. Also, I know Sherman wrote this one, but it actually has more of a King Diamond solo song vibe to it, and I'm not sure why that is. Anyways, the lyrics definitely feel like a sequel of sorts to The Oath. I mean, The Oath is even mentioned. Crystal Ball is also mentioned here, maybe the one he got from the Gypsy, who knows? And I should bring up the matter of the actual spelling of the song title. Is it Princess or Princes? Well, the name of the song is supposed to be Welcome Princes of Hell. Princess was a title misprint, which the line I'm alone with my friends, plural, shows it's not what the typo claims. If you check out the original vinyl and CD's lyric sheet, it states Princes correctly. But the modern vinyl repress from Metal Blade has all instances in the lyrics wrongly changed to Princess, which is ridiculous. In any case, King has officially stated that it is Princes and not Princess, so there's the final word on that. Moving on to track 8, we have To One Far Away. Track opens with one of King's vocal lullabies, albeit brief and layered. Largely, this is an acoustic guitar number with very soulful electric leads over top it. It's only a minute and a half long and serves as more of an intro to the final track. One thing I do get out of this mostly instrumental is that it has this almost Rosemary's Baby theme feel to it. Remember that 2 had a vocal lullaby part? I wonder if they were tapping into some of that as a source for some inspiration, because even as a teenager hearing this, I thought that movie theme kind of came to mind, at least a little bit. It's not exact. Anyways, regardless of whether you view this as an intro track or a standalone instrumental, I do feel like it belongs here, which is to say that I dig it a lot. And any chance to show off some of that expansive guitar work from the band is really a good thing. Denner and Sherman are such a strength in classic era Mercyful Fate. No question. Moving on to track 9, we've got Come to the Sabbath. Track opens immediately with ringing guitar chords, hi-hat hits, and King's heavily reverbed invitation to join him at the Sabbath gathering. Really love the alternating chord strikes and acoustic notes here, followed by some proggy but heavy riffing. Also really digging the King's vocal lullaby here. Also a bit Rosemary's Baby, I feel. It's followed by an almost funky passage, but then into King's final lyrics. Fun fact, this is the first song King Diamond ever wrote for Mercyful Fate, already penned even before the Melissa album was recorded. So they were hanging on to it until this point. And since King did write this, you can assume we get some more of the Satanic Bible here, this time with the ritual steps from that book, pretty much described exactly in order. 1 black candle, 1 white candle, calling the directional points, reading infernal names, and referencing that an Enochian key be read at the end. And as for my favorite lyric, it's definitely at the end. If you say heaven, I say a castle of lies. You say forgive him, I say revenge. Oh, my sweet Satan, you are the one. So a great album closer, right down to the echoed final line and fade out. So Mercyful Fate initially broke up in April of 1985 due to musical differences. Basically, Sherman wanted to move into a more commercial direction and actually went off to do just that with his own band, simply titled Fate. The rest of the band, minus drummer Kim Ruz, went off and formed the solo band named after King Diamond, of course. And because nothing's ever really simple in life, Mercyful Fate reformed in 1992 with the original lineup, again minus Ruz. And now both bands exist to this very day, or at least as of 2024 when I'm recording this. As for this album, I do know that there are a lot of fans who cite the previous record, Melissa, as their favorite. And there really is no getting around that Melissa is an amazing record. Almost a companion album to this one in some ways, much like Screaming and Defenders for Priest, or Peace of Mind and Power Slave for Maiden. But if you're holding a gun to my head and I'm told to pick between these 2 incredible Mercyful Fate albums, I'm going with Don't Break the Oath. But again, not by a lot. Oath certainly has some better production value, but also King and Denner get to write songs at this point, whereas songwriting is largely covered by Hank Sherman on Melissa, and to his insistence back then too. He did not want to let go of being the chief songwriter, and that's covered by interviews with King and Denner from back then. But he did relent, and that's why we got Don't Break the Oath as a more collaborative effort. And since King's in the mix more, we're also hearing shades of the King Diamond band coming through, which is also pretty awesome. So there's my reasoning. As for favorite tracks of this album, that's an easy one. Love the Oath, as well as Desecration of Souls. Those have been my favorites since I first heard this album in early 1985, 4 months after its release. but also love a dangerous meeting and come to the Sabbath as well. Now, of course, this is my favorite Mercyful Fate album, but what about yours? Is it this one? Is it another one? Let me know that, or any other band you'd like to see me cover in this series, or even anything else that this video brought up for you, in the comments below. And if you just found my channel for the first time, my name is Matt. This is the Accusation Network, where each and every week I do videos on classic and modern metal, but also metal vinyl collecting. That sounds like something you want to watch more of. Definitely like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and of course, share out my videos with your friends on social media. And of course, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.